Alright, I'm going to present to you a revolution in psychology as proposed by Carl Rogers. So first off, I'm going to read you a passage from his book, Client-Centered Therapy. So I think this passage is really a powerful message to his method and how much effect it has on society. So he says, this book is, I believe, about life as life vividly reveals itself in the therapeutic process, with its blind power and its tremendous capacity for destruction, but with its overbalancing thrust towards growth, if the opportunity for growth is provided. I think this is a powerful statement about what his methods of therapy can get to. It can help humanity and make a huge impact in society. I really consider Carl Rogers to be like an adopted father of therapy, because he obviously did not start therapy, but that would be more Freud. But he did make such a great influence on that and the history of psychology. So some of the big early influences and for therapy in general, I would say Sigmund Freud was obviously one of the biggest ones. He proposed the free association, which was one of the first early therapeutic methods, where he would ask like an open-ended question, and then he'd invite the person to give an answer, and that would kind of maybe get to something, some unconscious forces that are going on that might be a problem, some kind of neuro problem that they're having going on, unconscious problem. Another big idea that I thought was important that Freud proposed was supervision. So having like a therapist sit in with another therapist before while they're training to kind of understand the process and get a first-hand experience, because that's something today that we find very important in the field as part of training. And the last one is counselor relationship. I think this is the most important thing that Freud contributed to therapy, because he believed that you should have some kind of counselor relationship to get the therapeutic method working. He actually more used people, I would say. I guess he did not care as much about people, but he did recognize that a relationship was really important, and that's something that Carl Rogers thought was very important as well. And then some of the big institutions or other things that would influence therapy. One of them is Austin Riggs Center, which was one of the first early therapy centers where people would just kind of say take a vacation. It's like a better version of mental clinics than that. That may make it sound bad, but it wasn't like a forced thing. It was just kind of a thing that if people are having struggles in life that they could go to, just kind of do some recreation, hang out with and talk to other people that are having problems. Just something therapeutic. So that was one of the first therapeutic major institutions. And the second was important was World War II, obviously, because psychologists got the whole career and profession of psychology got pushed and funded by the government, so it became widely more important to treat soldiers coming back for therapy that were having mental issues after the war. But the big movement that pushed Carl Rogers and humanism, and that is the third force, as you remember. That's how big of an impact it is in psychology. That was named the third force of psychology, and it began around the 1940s and centered in having a revolution against the typical psychological thoughts, where a lot of research was generalized to all people and there wasn't a lot of individualism or just thoughts just a thought for people as individuals. So it made people feel like they had more individualistic thoughts and abilities, and the ability to grow and be better in society. And Abraham Maslow was one of the biggest proponents of humanism in general, and also his self-actualization theory was one of the biggest influencers on Carl Rogers, which pretty much stated that every human has this great potential for growth and change, and that they can do that, and that influenced humanism the most, I think, other than Carl Rogers. So Carl Rogers, the man, talked about some of his origins. So one thing, he actually wanted to go into ministry originally because his family was religious, but he took one psychology class and he was out of religion completely after that. But I would just think that the ministry might have affected him and how much he wanted to help people. I think that was an important influencer. And he did his dissertation on children and personality adjustment, and the big thing with that was that he used objective and subjective methods. So that reflects on his current method of therapy, where you couldn't just do the regular science and you have to actually go out there and participate in the research yourself and like therapy. And in Child Studies Clinic in New York, he studied there where he made this breakthrough that people can change with, or should and best change from within. So he believed that was the most important way to provide therapy. And that was his non-directive method. I was defining that for him, and he fully defined that when he was a professor at the University of Chicago and Ohio State. And he was really loved by his students there. That was one of the biggest things that I had found, that his students just clung to him, and he was just very good mentor. And that's also where he wrote his books, including Client-Centered Therapy that I read from you. And his method, just really quickly, the three big things that he proposed: that you had to have some empathy for your client, and you had to have unconditional positive regard, which is basically acceptance that you should be able to change this person no matter what kind of person they were. That if they were a criminal or whatever, you had to accept who they were and help them change. And then genuineness and being honest with the person was really important. So he believed that the best way for a therapist to grow and change, and kind of his research method, I would say, is to self-evaluate yourself. So he did that mostly through recording practice, which is another big innovation for him. And then he also thought the client needed to be self-aware of all their problems so they could help change themselves, like I said, from within. So that was a big idea for him. So finding self-exploration for self and understanding your self-image and how you can change that. And then understanding the therapeutic method as seen through the client was a huge thing. So some of the big things I think that Carl Rogers, how he changed psychology, his evaluation and study of therapeutic methods became part of the science, and you wouldn't think exactly that this evaluation and reflection was part of a science, typically, but it actually became the counselor's literally method and practice. It's literally the career of the counselor to evaluate, self-reflect, and evaluate themselves. He also, like I mentioned, recorded therapy sessions, which was innovative. People didn't do that before, so they can evaluate themselves. The Distinguished Scientific Contributor Award by the APA is one of their highest honors, so that shows his recognition in the APA. And then obviously his work is applied in a variety of fields like business and government and school, military. And then I just briefly read a couple bits of quotes from him in a later interview of his life. He didn't like fame, but he's glad to have friends that don't think of him as famous. And he thought his methods of science were just not appropriate, or the original methods were not appropriate to the actual human condition. He thought that social issues were very important, and I just think he was so radical in his views. It just says about it there, that he changed the field to be, and made therapy important to psychology. Any questions? Yes.
What do you think his greatest contribution was to the field of psychology?
I think that just how much he pushed therapy, and he brought this whole method, like this whole book has this whole method in there. I think that's literally, counselors and many therapists use many of his treatment, like part of his method there, and their understanding and evaluation of themselves. I think it's weird because it's almost like basic knowledge, or what you would think, evaluate yourself, reflect, and care about the client and have, reflect on their feelings. But just, I think therapy is like one of the biggest parts of psychology now, so I think that he just kind of made it that important, like just the realization of it being that important. Yes?
In therapy, I think that one of the biggest things is like radical acceptance and like submission of needing help. Did he say anything about that and clients, about like talking to his clients about that at all?
Yeah, there's a lot of different things that get listed. I think there was like 10 different things that the client had to realize themselves, and I believe that was part of it. But yeah, there's a lot in his book. Like I couldn't read the whole thing, but definitely, because there's a lot of things that the client had to start to realize to change, and that was probably part of it then, I would say.
That's all the time we have.